This podcast is brought to you by Ranch Vision, the software ranchers use to boost profits and make better decisions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rich Brazil. I am the founder of Ranch Vision. This program was designed for producers like you. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind, forward-looking software program that enables you to see the results of your management decisions months and years into the future, from your herd numbers to your replacement costs, break-even values, enterprise efficiency, your profit and loss, your cash flow, and so much more. With this program, you can move forward with confidence into the future. Ranch Vision isn't a historical record-keeping program like all the other programs you might have seen. It looks forward. It is a very challenging, very competitive industry, and every ranch business is unique, has different variables, different opportunities, different constraints. Ranch Vision was designed to take uncertainty out of your future, to enable you to plan to profit. Please go to our website to learn more, www.ranchvision.io. Grazing livestock and just grazing animals in general are a significant part of the planet. That really is the planet.
The average age of the farmer in America is 58 years old. That is not sustainable.
We've been hit with water curtailments. We've been hit with low prices by the conditions, by the rain, by the lamb crop, by the calf crop.
I heard a Native American gentleman say, wilderness, that's an invention of the white man, because we took care of this land.
Sometimes fighting doesn't mean shouting and screaming and pounding your fist. Sometimes it's just putting your boots on and being there for work the next day.
It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. My opponents do not. I believe in the right of the people.
There are cowboys still around. You just probably don't see them because we're working all the time.
I'm Keely Brazil Cavello, and this is America UNWON.
Welcome back to UNWON. I'm here with Congressman James Gallagher. Congressman, thanks so much for joining me.
Great to be with you, Keely.
When I visited you just a few weeks ago in D.C., I got to see you at your office on Capitol Hill. Very cool. You'd barely moved in. You were kind of still unpacking.
Yeah, we've just been, I keep saying we've been building the plane like as we're flying it, when you kind of come in midstream like that. But no, it's good to have you there, and sound like you had a really awesome experience back there going in and being there with the president and being in the Rose Garden for the Ag Dinner.
That was pretty cool. I know, that was pretty special. Once in a lifetime. Well, you were sworn in, I think June 10th, is that right?
Yes.
And you're home now. What's it like to be in DC? What surprised you most about how things actually work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, one, it's been overwhelming. It's amazing, to be able to walk those halls and realize that you're kind of part of, the governing of this country, right? And the history behind that. I mean, all those who came before, knowing that Abraham Lincoln was part of, the House of Representatives, John Quincy Adams. I mean, so you think of these people who came before you. I think of Doug LaMalfa, who, I came into this seat following in his footsteps. And who, I wish was with us now, man. He was a great representative for us. And so you think about all of that, and then at the same time, you're trying to get new staff on board for the DC office. We kind of had to start all over there and find good people and who can help you navigate everything there. And then I think it's also like, it's been really rewarding. I mean, it's been a whirlwind. It's been crazy. It's been chaotic at times, but we've actually been able to get some good things done. One of them was passing this Water Resources Development Act out of committee that's going to put investments, up to $155 million worth in the Sacramento Valley into water projects that we really need to ensure the reliability of our watersheds, the resiliency, ensure that we're, protecting and stewarding our habitat and water resources. That's been a really rewarding thing. And there's, I would say we hit the ground running, and I'm pretty proud of what we've been able to do, in such a short time.
Yeah, no kidding. 6 weeks in, I have here $155 million for the Sacramento River Basin. You had that in the House water bill. You talked a little bit about what that money will do for your district. This old fight that we've had, California Water kind of pitched it as fish versus farms, but the way you just described it there, you see it as fish and farms, birds and farms, wildlife and farms. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sixth generation California farmer, and we've always viewed it that way. I mean, there's so much wildlife on our ranch, and you know this as well. Farmers and ranchers are like we're the stewards, of our land, of all the critters and creatures that are, on that land, and certainly the water. That's like the lifeblood of what we do out there. And so. We've always really looked at it that way, but there's been sort of this war on farmers and trying to take our water away and say that we're somehow not using it wisely, and this kind of forced scarcity mentality that's been, that's certainly been brought about in California, where we're going to tell everybody to just shut off all their water, and somehow you're supposed to, if you live in the city, hey, either take a shower or wash the dishes today, you choose, right? And if you're a farmer, hey, try to grow some food for the world without water. I mean, it makes no sense. And so, we've been fighting against that. What I think is a pretty radical philosophy that is diametrically opposed to what we're trying to do as stewards.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you have another water bill you plan to introduce coming up here soon that you're naming after the late Congressman Doug LaMalfa. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Doug was always like a big proponent of water and better management of our water. He would always say, hey, we need to operate our reservoir, the reservoirs we have right now. Let's operate them better. Let's make sure we're using the latest technology. And this is something we actually got into the water resources bill, but it's also, part of this legislation I'm proposing is, how we operate Shasta Dam and doing that based on forecast-based operations. The bottom line is this: it helps us store more water, for all the needs that we have in California. Instead of using antiquated manuals that were created in the 50s and 60s, we're going to use the latest technology to make sure that we're maximizing our water. And so, that and a lot of these projects that we've been pushing for throughout the North State are part of this, Doug LaMalfa water bill.
Yeah, you really hit the ground running. Can you tell me a little bit about what it means to fill Doug LaMalfa's term, fill his seat? He was a mentor of yours. He was a great representative for the North Coast, and I know you're already filling those shoes and walking in his footsteps. But tell me a little bit about your relationship with him, what you learned from him, and what it means to you to represent his district.
Well, I got my start in politics working with Doug. I was just a young man kind of trying to find out about how our political system worked. And he had just come into the state assembly at the time. So I started working for him. I ultimately, ended up going on to law school, after that. But, during that period of time, I saw a man who was genuine, who really cared about his district. He was never a guy that was like trying to go to the cameras or get in the limelight. He just wanted to get things done for his people. And he would go to every part of the district. And you saw that with these new district lines, right? With this new District 1, he got in his car and said, hey man, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to get to know all these people. I want to show them that I care. He got on the Potter Valley issue right away. He started building relationships over there. And I think just, like if, had he lived and was with us today, I really feel like he would have won over a lot of people. He already was. And so me coming into that, like, I want to be true to that legacy of leadership, genuine statesman type leadership, citizen legislator, type leadership. And I just want to, finish a lot of the projects that he was working on, building new water stores, not taking down dams, but like, let's build new water storage and let's modernize what we have. And let's start thinking about how we can use technology, to better maximize our water resource, right? To me, that's the kind of abundance. If you want to talk about abundance, that word gets used a lot now, right? Ezra Klein has really popularized that. It's like, if we want an abundance mentality, then we need to do these types of things, and we shouldn't be going backwards, with this sort of, radical philosophy that's proposed by others.
Right, right. Well, California's voted they want more water storage. We've said that, and it just hasn't been done. So you're really just following the will of the people on that. Like
Right.
Doug LaMalfa, you're a farmer. You have 5 kids. You're back and forth between California and DC right now. You said you have family with with the farm helping you with that. But can you tell me how you're balancing all of that? And also, I just think it's amazing to have more farmers and ranchers in DC. It makes me happy. Does that bring a perspective to you and to your new job?
I mean, I think it's so important, man. I mean, because there's, there isn't a lot of us, right? Our perspective, I think, is so important to have, in those halls of government. And it's something that since I have been involved in public service, I've always tried to bring. I mean, no one else can bring that voice. So, I want to make sure I do it and do it, in a really solid way, in a sometimes loud way, and do what I can to make sure that our issues are on the table. Balance wise, it's been crazy. It's chaotic. And, my wife is amazing. And, she, my wife, Jana, manages a lot of things, keeps the kids, on their path and the things that they need to be doing. And she's also joined me back there on occasion too, because we want to make this a family thing. I want my kids to be able to be part of what I'm doing as opposed to this being some kind of separate thing. Right. And so we really tried to incorporate our family into this service. Right. Because, look, at the end of the day, man, I want to be a good father. Right. I mean, I certainly want to be a good representative, but I also want to be a good father and a good husband. And I think I'm a better legislator when I do those things too. So that's important to me.
That's refreshing. Well, you mentioned the assembly. That was your first job with Doug LaMalfa. Then you went on to serve in the state assembly. Was it 12 years? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And you were always in the minority there. That's a pretty blue state assembly. What was that like? What'd you learn from your time fighting? And I always saw you in the headlines. You were one of the few people sticking up for rural California and Sacramento.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I went to law school. I got a law degree, and I used that really to help farmers and ranchers, small business. That was the practice I was in. But as I was doing that, I really saw a lot of the challenges from government, right? I mean, a lot of the times what they were dealing with is just government overreach and bureaucracy and getting in the way of good projects like flood control projects that my community needed, water projects, housing, just trying to build more housing. And we know we need that, right? I mean, for our young people that are, trying to, start families. And so, I decided, hey, I'd run for state assembly. Obviously I'd had that experience working with Doug. And so for the last 12 years, I've had that opportunity to be the voice of my community. And I mean, I'm not afraid to mix it up. I'll get into it in committee with these guys. And I think that's what we need. Ask hard questions, be willing to challenge the orthodoxy that so often is wrong. And that's been a big part of what I've done in the state. And
now you're in the majority in Congress. How is that different? Does it feel different, or is it still dysfunctional?
It is very nice to be in the majority. And I joke that like my whole adult life I've been in the minority. I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad.
Oh wow,
that was
brave of you. A farm kid at Berkeley.
Yeah, conservative farm kid at Berkeley. I was a little bit maybe fish out of water, but found some like-minded, individuals, and we managed to do just fine there. But then I went to the state legislature in the minority. But you know what, man, I think that's really prepared me well. Because I think when you're in the minority, you have to fight that much harder. You have to make your arguments that much sharper. You have to strategize in order to be successful. You have to find ways to work across the aisle, and I did. And so now that I have the opportunity to be in a majority, I can bring all those skills to bear to get results for my people. And again, like I think that WRDA bill was one example. But we passed a housing bill, as soon as I got it as well. It's going to help build more housing nationwide. We passed a bill dealing with social media and trying to make sure that parents have better controls, when it comes to their kids. So we've done some really good things that, it's nice that you can do when maybe when you have a little bit more power and influence, right?
Totally. Yeah, that must feel nice for a change. So this November, if people are confused, you had to run to fill Representative LaMalfa's seat after he passed away. So you're finishing out his term, but then you have to run again in November. And this time you're running in a new district, thanks to Prop 50, which is Governor Gavin Newsom's bill. It was supposed to, in his portrayal, answer Texas's redistricting efforts by creating more Democrat seats in California. In my opinion, it really erased rural Californian voices. But can you describe for listeners what happened to the map and what that race now looks like for you in District 1? You're not running for the same seat that Doug LaMalfa had for so long. You have a whole new battleground.
Yeah. So traditionally, District 1, has been this North State district, right? Which basically runs from just north of Sacramento all the way to the Oregon border. And it's, more inland, northeast California. Very rural, a lot of agriculture, forests, mountains, small towns and communities. That's traditionally how they've drawn that California district. So what they did with Prop 50, and it was totally intentional, was to break that up into 3 different districts. So they took that entire northeast area and broke it into 3 districts. One on the very north combines Modoc County, way up in the northeast, with Marin County. 2 places
Could not be more different.
Yeah. And Jared Huffman is running in that district, and it was drawn to favor him. And then they, in the center part of that, they drew a district from Susanville and Lassen County down to Santa Rosa. And that's the district I'm running. And that's the new District 1. And then at the very bottom, they took Yuba and Sutter, Colusa counties and combined it with Napa County. And so, that was the idea, is to basically drown out that North State voice and combine it with, more Bay Area counties and cities, with the hope that, a Democrat would be elected in each of those districts. Mike McGuire, of course, was the state senator at the time and was involved with the redistricting. And, it's been reported that he was part of drawing this district, to favor himself, to pick his voters and hopefully win it, in that way. And so Gavin and Mike, devised this plan, but I think it's actually going to backfire, because number one, I think people are tired of this stuff, right? They're tired of backroom deals. They're tired of government corruption, and they're tired of the kind of leadership that, Mike and Gavin have shown. And what I've been heartened by is that, hey, as I've gotten over into this new area, there's a whole lot of people who are like, you know what? He's been our representative in the past, but can't really tell you what he's really done for us. And in fact, a lot of bad things have happened to us. Our price of fuel has gone through the roof. No one's held PG&E accountable, and the electricity rates have gone through the roof. And so costs have spiraled out of control, and they don't feel safe about their communities. And so, these things I think are really government overreach. This Potter Valley issue, right? I think is one of those things where it's like, we're just going to let PG&E, go ahead and tear down this dam that we actually really need from a water reliability standpoint, from a wildfire fighting standpoint. And where's their leader? Where's Mike McGuire? Like, he's been silent, right? And I'll point out, that's a common theme with Mike. He's actually pretty silent on things that really impact, people in this district. And that's one thing I will never be, is silent. If my people are getting hurt by something, I'm going to be loud. I'm going to be in people's face, and I'm going to be trying to get something done about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he hasn't said anything to my knowledge. He's just been kind of watching from the sidelines. And it really does shock me, Congressman, because this is such an existential issue. As you know, I know you've had to jump into it. Wasn't your district previously, and you've kind of already hit the ground running. You've been up to Potter Valley. You've seen the area. You've talked to people. I mean, you've really gotten involved in this issue and caught up to speed, which I appreciate so much. I know the whole community appreciates. But I mean, how does it strike you to see this dam removal that would impact 750,000 people and nobody's been talking about it? Is it just me, or is that crazy?
No, it is crazy. And, what it reminds me of is some different things that have happened over the years. One was, they took down the Klamath dams, and so Doug was actually really opposed to that. And we've seen in the aftermath of that, there's been a lot of problems, since that happened. We also had, in the district Lake Almanor, which is operated by PG&E. At one point, there was a proposal to put in a thermal curtain, which would have devastated that lake. It would pull all the cold water out, and send it down the river. It would have devastated that lake. And a lot of people got fired up and said, hey, we're not going to, stand for that. So we had some examples of where this kind of mentality has gone. And it's like, hey, this should be, we got to draw the line. We got to finally draw the line on this stuff. And I think Potter Valley is a great issue, because it's like, here we have this water source that so many people rely upon. And you're right. No, until you guys got active, until your group got active and started asking questions and pushing back, it was almost like no one was paying attention to it. Right.
Yeah.
And they were just going to let another dam be taken down and a water resource be taken away. And the aftermath, the negative impact to the communities, is the damage is already done, right? And so to me, like, to come in is like, hey, this is a great righteous stand to say, no, let's reverse this trend, right?
Right.
Let's, instead of taking things down, let's reinvest in our communities. We can make this dam and the hydro, bring back the hydropower to it. We need the electricity, and it's zero emission. It's affordable energy that we could be brought to bear for our communities. We need the water. I mean, there's so many reasons why, this just makes all the sense in the world to keep the dam in place, keep the water resource. And to me, I don't understand why more and more people don't see how crazy it is that we would even consider tearing down this dam, and then as I've learned more about the issues, this whole seismic issue is bogus. And I've dealt with a lot of dam safety because I went through the whole Oroville Dam crisis. And in the aftermath of that, I actually passed legislation to make sure that there was consistent dam reviews, dam safety reviews, and that they're actually doing real investigations into those dams. And if you look at the paperwork on this, like Potter Valley's and Scott Dam has never been on the high priority list for seismic at all. It is not. There's many other dams, in California that are much higher on that list, right? And yet they're saying, "Oh, we really got to do something about this," right? It's a bogus thing. I mean, when you look at that, then you'd be taking down all kinds of dams if that was really the case. And of course, we would not want to do that. I mean, you could even say Oroville, is one. I mean, we're going to take that dam down? No, we're not, because the whole entire state relies on that water source, right? So, to me, like, the more you dig into this, the more you realize there's something else going on here, right? And it's not what they state it is.
What do you think is going on? I know we're speculating because we don't have. Well, the local media has been complicit. They haven't reported on anything. I'm one of the only people digging into this at all. I have my suspicions about what's behind it, but from the time that you've looked at it, what do you think is going on here? Is this a mentality? Is this corruption?
Well, to me, it is a bit of this like sort of cultist mentality that all dams are bad and that dams have destroyed fish and that dams have destroyed the environment. When in fact, like, actually a lot of the dams that we've constructed over the years have helped ensure that there's a continuous flow of water in rivers and streams that would dry up, otherwise, right? And
which is good for fish.
Yeah, fish can't really swim without water, guys.
Right.
And so, to me, these reservoirs are actually really good, really a positive aspect to the management of the environment and fish, as well as providing water for all of us, right? But there's been this cultist mentality that's arisen, which is, if we just get rid of all the dams, all the salmon will come back and somehow all this stuff will just be magically restored. And the reality has been nothing but that, and in this case, they're bragging, and they want that, hey, if we take down the Scott Dam, we'll have the longest stretch of water right, in California that has no dam on it. Well, that's just an emotional thing. I mean, even right now, there's a very long stretch of the Eel River that doesn't have any dam on it, right? And it's pristine waters that a lot of people fish right now today, and it has a very vibrant ecology to it as we sit here today. And so, what are you actually improving by doing this? Is to me, it's almost like a religious fervor to just get rid of dams. And of course, but where does that leave you in the aftermath? It leaves you without water that you need, and in this case, all the way down to Cloverdale, and even further, south, we could see impacts to people's water, right? The Alexander Valley, and and so it's not just the Potter Valley, right? It's all the way down to the Alexander Valley that you could see these huge impacts. It's a firefighting resource that would be gone, and we know we've had these catastrophic wildfires, that have been a plague in the North State, and we're just going to take that resource away. I mean, again, like for what real purpose? And again, I think that is really what is behind it, is sort of like this, religious zeal on behalf of some that, the answer to everything is to actually destroy what we've built over time, restore, there's, you see some of these people, they want to tear down our government, right? They think we shouldn't have a U.S. Senate anymore. They think we shouldn't have a Supreme Court. Sort of this democratic socialist group that has really emerged with a lot of influence and power. They want to tear down the things that we've built up as Americans because somehow like those things are inherently evil or something. And to me, like, that's kind of what we're fighting against. We're fighting against that radical ideology.
Totally. Yeah, that's the big picture. That's really what is going on. It's like an environmental communism. For people who don't know, if you're not from California, you're not from the North State, you haven't followed, we're talking right now about dam removals on the Eel River. So there are 2 dams that are slated to be removed by Pacific Gas and Electric, which is the utility monopoly that owns these dams. They're planning to remove those dams, and that would cut a water supply for 750,000 people. And like Congressman Gallagher is saying, it also cuts a really vital wildfire fighting asset in that area, which is very fire prone. We've had 2 of the 3 largest wildfires in California state history, both within the last 9 years or so, and both put out with water from the Potter Valley Project from Lake Pillsbury, which is the lake formed by one of these dams. So it's a really existential issue, but because it impacts rural Californians, it hasn't been discussed. And it's been politicized, which I find odd. I don't understand why it's a political football. It really shouldn't be. It should be bipartisan. And when you talk to locals, it is bipartisan. People on both sides of the aisle see the importance of water and infrastructure. But maybe you're getting to the heart of it. Maybe this is a mentality. It's an ideology. It's a worldview that goes deeper. One of the leading voices in this has been Congressman Huffman. You're not running against Congressman Huffman, but he currently represents the Potter Valley area, and you would represent that area now as part of District 1. So he's getting districted out. He won't be our congressman anymore. Thank God, frankly. But he will still have a lot of rural constituents. But it's funny because Congressman Huffman right now, you mentioned religious zeal. He's out there on a book tour talking about the crisis of Christian nationalism in America. He has this new book about his concerns about Christianity in the country. But you're right. This is kind of a religious zeal. There's something very ideological about the desire to tear out what we have and to destroy what we have as though it's penance for something. And I don't want to venture too far into that mentality, but I do think you're hitting on something important. What do you make of Congressman Huffman's passion for cutting these dams out? That's really the only way I can explain it. He seems very, very hell-bent on getting these dams out and cutting water to his own constituents.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand that, look, as I said previously, that I've found common ground with people on the other side of the aisle on a lot of issues, on environmental issues, on stewardship, making sure that we have an abundant, water resource for all the needs for the environment, for fish, for people, right, for farms. And I think that there's the ability to do that, but this is just one thing where I don't understand it. I'll liken it to California's climate policy, right? Like, I think we should have a smart climate policy that lowers emissions. But what we've done in California is we've said hands off our forests, don't do anything in them, and then we've mandated that you can't have a certain truck, you can't drive, a certain car. We put all these mandates on our electricity bills that drive our costs through the roof to where it's unaffordable. And then our forests burn and millions of metric tons of carbon go up into the atmosphere, and just completely obliterate whatever reductions we've seen. That's a totally backward policy. And I think that's the same thing here is like, yes, we want to be good stewards of our water resource and our fisheries, right? But how does like getting rid of a dam that helps manage flows, that helps make sure that there is water resource for all those things, how does that do it? Now it's completely, there is no controls. And we've seen that in the aftermath. Then you take a dam down, all the silt that's built up behind it comes down through the riverway and just, it's not helpful, to that ecology in that river. So like, to me, it's just a backwards way of looking at it. And that's why I say the only thing I can see behind it is sort of like this environmental religious zeal that somehow everything we built is bad and is evil and needs to be taken down. Even you're talking about like the history of our country and of our politics has been men and women driven by faith, and many times their Christian faith to better our government, to better our society. Martin Luther King Jr. may be one that I think of the most, right? And Jared's out there talking about how religion and politics is a bad thing. I don't understand that, right? I mean, to me, again, sure, certainly things we could probably work on and agree on, but this is just absolutely not one of them. And I think we're just on completely opposite, viewpoints of that.
Yeah. And as much as he's trying to make it a partisan issue, it's really not. Congressman Mike Thompson, who currently represents Lake County, he's a Democrat. He has pushed back on these dam removals. He's not in support of them because he knows what it would do to his community. So it's an extremist viewpoint. And I just pulled up this article I remembered seeing the other day. 65% of Californians oppose Governor Gavin Newsom's plan to ban the sale of new gas-powered cars. And that's up from, I think, 34% just a few years ago. Most people supported that measure a few years back. Now, 2/3 oppose it. So it just kind of shows that this climate extremism is not popular with normal people. It's gone too far. People see through it. And it also disproportionately affects rural folks like a lot of your constituents.
Right. And I go back to that. Gavin created that mandate not by going to the people's house and asking the legislature to pass a new law. He actually did that by an executive order. He did that right in the aftermath of the North Complex fire that burned all the way down to Lake Oroville, obliterated the community of Berry Creek. Again, the whole issue there was not managing our forests and not getting dangerous fuels out of there. And we had another terrible fire. He showed up in my backyard, and Doug LaMalfa's backyard, didn't invite us. He came there with the assemblyman from Beverly Hills, and he announced that he was going to do this new mandate that the real problem and the reason we're experiencing fires is because you're driving a gas-powered car. And I'm going to therefore ban these, by 2030 from anybody being able to buy a gas or diesel-powered vehicle. I mean, it's completely clueless, right? And out of touch with what is really going on. We want to reduce emissions, and I think we've actually done a lot to reduce emissions and improve our air quality in California. I'm proud of what we've done as a state from that standpoint. But what we don't need is these kind of ridiculous mandates that all they do is drive up our costs. And again, they're not getting at the core problem of managing our forests, which is why we're having these catastrophic fires, which is why we're not meeting our climate emission goals. Like, let's do the thing that makes the most sense, that many studies have shown is the most cost-effective way to reduce carbon, is to manage your forests in this state. That's why it's so important to me. It's been a passion of mine. Those are the things that we need to do. And look, people are finally seeing this as well. Just by you saw that poll. Now, overwhelmingly, people are against this because they've seen that it does nothing. It's an exponential cost to people to be required to buy an electric vehicle. And for those of us in rural areas, we don't even have charging stations. Where would we charge it? I mean, we need, in order to bring food to your table, everybody needs food. Everybody wants food at the grocery store. Guess what brings that food to you? A diesel powered tractor and a diesel powered truck. And look, that are much cleaner burning because of what we've done over the years, but we still need them. And you can't just mandate that we ban them and we can't use them anymore.
Yeah, 100% for your ideology. So during this last special election, which you won 62% under the old lines, correct? So
Right.
Tell me your pitch as you look at this new district. Talk to me about your pitch to Democrats and your pitch to people who maybe disagree with you in some areas of your party platform, but they're tired of business as usual from Sacramento.
My pitch is look at my record and look what I've done, as a legislator, that I've worked across the party lines, worked with Republicans, Democrats, Independents to get real things done for my district. One of them is wildfire, really getting on top of that issue, getting more funding for doing the fuel reduction work that we need to do. I'm proud of that record. Holding PG&E accountable, to wildfire victims. I introduced legislation this year to ensure that victims get fully compensated, because about 30% of what they lost has not been compensated, through the Wildfire Victims Trust. We also said, hey, the money they got, and I passed this bill on a bipartisan basis, the money they got is completely tax-free, as it should be, because of, me working across party lines to get that done. So look at my record of being a bipartisan legislator who looks out for the interests of his district. And I think that a lot of people are going to say, hey, that's what we really want, because you haven't had that, in Mike McGuire. I mean, as I'm talking to people, Mike has supported every bill that has raised your costs through the roof. He's supported these crazy bills that allow rapists, murderers, child predators to get out of prison early, as long as they're 50 years old, because apparently in his mind, if you're 50 years old, you're too old to be in prison and you should be eligible for parole. And this isn't made up. It happened. David Allen Funston was released. A child rapist was released early from prison under a bill that Mike voted for twice. And it gets worse. When those same parole commissioners came up for appointment in the Senate just this year, Mike abstained from the vote. He didn't even try to get rid of these commissioners that released this monster into our society. Again, Mike was silent. And I think a lot of people maybe are used to seeing Mike around and he seems like a nice guy. His votes are not very nice and they're not very helpful to you. And wouldn't it be nice to have somebody who's really out advocating for the issues that you care about, and that's fighting in those halls of government for you and looking out for your interests? That's the pitch I make. I've been honored to do the work I've done, and also look at the injustice of, yes, in the North State District, the people just voted, and 62% of them overwhelmingly said, hey, this is the person we want as our representative. But if Mike and Gavin Newsom have their way, right, they'll rig it in a way that I can't be their representative. I can't be their voice. There's something that seems fundamentally wrong about that, right? That's not the democracy, the representative government that is foundational to our American experiment, right? And so I think people are starting to see that. I think they're seeing through it. And I'm hopeful that, at the end of the day, the people will vote. There are no kings. Mike doesn't get to choose, that he doesn't get to choose his voters. It's the other way around, right? And so when people vote, my hope is that they're going to, put their trust in me and as somebody who will be their voice and be someone who will represent people regardless of party.
Mm. Well, and again, Congressman, you've already demonstrated that because you've been to Potter Valley and you've covered this issue and you've talked about it. Just to kind of close the loop on that, what would be your plan, your approach to saving water? I think this is going to be a wedge issue for voters who may be willing to cross lines just to save their water in Mendocino County and Lake County. Across the board, that whole area, this is such an important issue. It's so existential. It will really destroy this community and change its face. So can you just quickly tell me your plan for that, why people should pull the lever for you, not for Mike McGuire, who has been, at best, nowhere to be seen on this issue. At worst, I would say involved in it from some reports. He has been part of this push to remove the dams, and he shares this environmental extremist ideology that you're talking about.
I've seen many times over the years where like a proposal might get pretty far down the road, but it hasn't had a lot of scrutiny. It hasn't had a lot of public attention. And the people most affected didn't really know what the effects of it were. And then once they do, like obviously, and for good reason, people say, well, hold on a second. This is not good. I'm worried. And I think that's what's happened here. And in the times that I've seen that, that's when a lot of good can happen, right? Instead of just forging ahead with a preconceived process, hold the phone. Let's get all the stakeholders together, right? Everybody involved here. Obviously the people who are affected, the landowners, the farmers, the consumers of water that need this water, the people who are worried about their homes burning down in a wildfire. But and also PG&E, also the government entities involved, all the different agencies who are involved, and let's talk about this and say, hey, is there a better way forward than just taking down this dam? Because you guys have only been looking at one option, and there may be other options, and now we know that there are other water districts who are interested. They were told previously, oh no, nobody else is interested, nobody wants this. That's not true, right? It could be Bureau of Reclamation, right? That might, be interested in taking over operation of the dam. So get all these people together and let's have the conversation. Let's look through this. Let's see if there are other options, because there may be a better compromise that meets all the different interests here, right? And so to me, that's where I think we need to, put the focus on, and that's what I would be working for. And I've done this many times. Bringing together all the people and sort of mediating. Facilitating a conversation to get to a better result, right? And that's that's what government should be about, rather than just trying to kind of mandate through or push through one proposal that only one side of the equation really supports, right?
Right. And how can anyone be opposed to that? It does feel like it was this backroom deal, and we made our way into the back room where they had this all figured out and planned out, and they were ready to go. They had their special interest groups that were going to get money. In my opinion, that PG&E bailout bill that was signed right around the same time that PG&E reversed course and said they planned to take the dams out, that seems a little serendipitous. You've held PG&E to the fire in the past on getting victims taken care of after PG&E wildfires. PG&E caused wildfires. Gavin Newsom, by contrast, signed the bailout bill. He's just kind of a typical example of what's wrong with California, which it goes beyond Democrat, Republican. It's what happens when there's too much power concentrated on one side and corruption starts. Just on a side note here, do you think he's going to run for president? Do you think Gavin Newsom has that ambition?
Absolutely. And that's really been the problem, man. Like for 8 years, instead of having someone who's focused on governing California, we've had a guy who's really been focused on the next office. Like, how do I put myself in the best position, politically to run for president? And that's why, look, you see in a lot of the polls now, Gavin's approval rating has just dropped significantly in California because everybody's seen that. And so, yeah, I think he definitely will run. I think he's going to have a real hard time appealing in Iowa and Pennsylvania and these states were like, wait, what did you do? You increased people's costs beyond belief. You had the highest homelessness, the highest poverty rate. Like, what's your record? You can only do so many speeches, man. And there's only so much hair gel that'll cover over, your record. And so I think he's going to have a hard time. But yeah, I think he definitely tries to run for president.
I mean, it's gotten so bad here that you've actually pushed a bill, AJR 23, to look into splitting California. That's how unrepresented rural Californians feel. And you have a few county boards that have signed on to that. I mean, we've joked forever about the state of Jefferson, but do you think this is really something that might happen? Do you think this is a real proposal?
I mean, look, this is the problem and this is a lot of why I've run and why I've done the work that I've done is like so much of California, I just feels completely overlooked. Right. And especially the rural parts of the state. And it's like, what do you do when, at least we've had a voice. We had Doug LaMalfa in Congress. I've been there. The Dallies have been there in the Senate and the Assembly. At least you've had a voice. But what if they actually take away your very ability to even have a representative, to even have a voice? That's something that's like fundamentally American, right? I mean, it's why no taxation without representation. It's why we fought a revolution. So when you get to that point, that's why I introduced this like, hey, well, then maybe we want to have a discussion about having our own state and like being separate from those that would take away our very voice, right? And look, is that going to happen tomorrow? No, but I think it's worth having that conversation. And if nothing else, if it leads to people finally getting their voices heard, that's my goal, right? And I think there's a lot of people throughout this district, whether you live in Lassen County or Sonoma County, I think there's a lot of people who feel like, man, this government is not looking out for me. It's not helping me. It's doing something else and is completely, forgetting about my everyday needs. And affordability is probably the biggest one right now, but there's a lot of different ones. Ranchers who are having to deal with wolves killing their cattle because of bad government policy, right? People who are having a hard time getting their kids to soccer practice because they can't afford the gas. People who can't get into that first home because we've made the price of housing, impossible, right? With all the fees and regulations and that you have to go through. And so I think a lot of those people, want something different. And so that's what I'm trying to give people is give them that something different that I think would lead to better results.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you about wolves. You've been up north quite a bit on the campaign trail, I'm sure. What have you heard from ranchers up there? What's it like in these counties like Lassen and Siskiyou where the wolves are getting pretty serious?
It's terrible, and it's if you're in farming and ranching, I think it's a common saying. You're like, it's one thing after the other, and because in the ranching community, like for a long time, cattle prices have been pretty depressed. It's been really tough. And now like we finally have good prices for cattle and our cattle are getting killed. Right. And we've actually
Can't catch a break.
even ones that aren't killed, right?
Yeah.
Like are having weight loss because of the stress of wolves. And so they're very frustrated. They just we want better tools to be able to manage this wolf population that now has 12 packs roaming the North State, whereas we used to have no gray wolves. They allowed them to come in, they allowed them to propagate. We need to have tools, including lethal force for basically what we call bad wolves who have learned to kill and are going to continue to kill. We're not talking about eradicating the entire population, but we do need to have tools to stop them from, attacking and thinking that it's okay to kill cattle. Again, it's about management, and we need to have good management instead of, what we've had over these past couple decades.
Yeah, and now we have a proposal, I've talked about it a couple times, to introduce grizzlies, which sounds insane, but I could see it happening. I know, it's crazy. Do you know this lady, Laura Richardson? She represents LA.
I do. It's like, and she's from Long Beach, and you're like, hey man, like, do you understand? I mean, have you ever even come in contact with a grizzly bear?
I guess no.
Part of me says, you know what, we'll do a pilot project and we'll release them in downtown Long Beach. And if you guys can live with them and you can coexist, with them, and then we'll try it out in other parts of the state. But let's try it in Long Beach first and see how it works. We'll put them in your parks. I mean, maybe in your parks, there'd be a good place for them to roam. And yeah, I mean, but don't put them up. But don't put them up in my parks. I mean, don't put them up in our ranches and say, oh yeah, you guys just deal with it. Like, you guys deal with it. You guys figure out what this is like. And I think sometimes when you turn it around on them and you kind of put like, dude, imagine what that would be like for you. It sometimes gets their attention. And I know that there's been a lot of good conversations that have been had. I hope that this thing doesn't go through. Ultimately, I know, for instance, Heather Hadwick, from the North State, has had a lot of good conversations. Megan Daly, who's a senator, from the North State. I hope we can stop this thing, but it's crazy that we're even talking about it.
Right. And just the fact that it's someone from LA, from Long Beach, it just really highlights the disconnect. It's the same issue with dams. They don't want to remove Hetch Hetchy. They don't want to remove dams that impact rural places. They're not worried about Owens River Valley, where LA gets all its water from. They are focused on their environmental extremism projects in places that they don't have to visit, don't have to see. I just interviewed, speaking of water, John Norris, who's a former game warden in California, and he started the marijuana eradication team. We were talking about the cartels on our public land, and he was telling me something like 1 billion gallons a year of water is stolen for these illegal grow operations, a lot of them run by transnational drug organizations. Are you aware of this issue? Has that come across your radar in the North State? These, crazy cartel infiltration, drug operations happening on reservations and in our public forests. And I mean, just contrast that huge water issue. We're getting all this water stolen for these illegal ops with farmers and ranchers who get their water cut year after year. They're scrutinized constantly. They cannot catch a break, but nobody cares to clean out the forest. Nobody cares to enforce the border.
Such a great point. And I mean, here is the thing I would love to work with Jared Huffman on, right? Like, hey, here's something we could get together on, right? Like, let's stop. I mean, they're polluting our water. They're stealing our water, right? There are transnational gangs that are behind it. Let's do something about that, right? To ensure, the long-term sustainability of our water resource, right? And I just think it's so important. There hasn't been nearly enough attention on it. We have done some task forces, and I actually went on one of these where they did a big bust up in the foothills in Yuba County, and it's really amazing what they do, but they don't have nearly enough resources to get on top of it. And so I think that this is something that we should expand upon. We need to go after these, transnational cartels and gangs and enforce, right? And all for what? To protect our water resources, right? I mean, so this to me is something that needs a whole lot more attention and focus. And yeah, instead of going after legal actors who are just using their water to grow your food, how about we go after the people who are, using this as a drug cartel that poisons our kids and that poisons our water?
Right. Yeah, seeing these photos, I mean, you'd think that Jared would be all over this. He's a self-described environmentalist. There's all of these poisons, carbofurans in the forest, dead animals. It's really horrific. It's poisoning our...
Hey, man, I would love to, and I'll put it out there, put the offer out there, and I'd love to work with him on that. Let's see if we can, put some effort into that. To me, that seems like a something that we should really be putting our focus on.
Yeah, completely. It seems like it should be a bipartisan deal. You
Right.
have a lot of bipartisan experience. You've passed 50 plus bills in a cited Democratic supermajority. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do I have that right? Okay, that's impressive. Talk to me about what bipartisanship has looked like in action, maybe a bill that you got done, a deal you closed with the other side.
One of them was, getting a tax-free exemption for wildfire victim settlement payments. Right now, that's not always easy because one, the government likes its revenue; they don't want to tax exempt anything. But I teamed up with Bill Dodd, Democrat from Napa County, and who had the same thing, had a lot of people who've been affected by this. And I wouldn't say that was really hard. I mean, we got it through. We did have to have negotiations with the administration. We got bipartisan votes all the way through. But it was just like, hey, this is something that is a good thing. It's a righteous cause. I worked in a bipartisan manner on legislation to get greater privacy protections. There's many things that we can work on together that don't have to be partisan, right? Wildfire. I mean, getting more money and resources into reducing our fuel loads. Worked in a very bipartisan fashion in getting those things done. So, to me, I've always looked at it as it's not a zero-sum game. We all are affected. Doesn't matter what party you are, we're all affected by these issues. And mostly what our constituents want is us to actually get some solutions and get some real results on them. And so that's what I've always tried to put a focus on.
You're a farmer, you're a dad, you've served California for a long time. Now you're doing that in Congress. Just quickly, as I let you go, I know you have to leave here. Talk to me about what gives you hope for the future, what makes you optimistic. These topics can be kind of heavy and frustrating, especially in California, where we do have a lot of stagnation. We have a lot of political gridlock, and these are big existential issues. But I know that there's change possible. This is still a free country. I've seen that even with the Potter Valley issue. We've changed the math on that. Talk to me about what gives you hope and what's kept you going, even being in the minority for so long. How do you keep trucking, and what makes you hopeful for your kids and for the next generation in this country?
One is young people that I've been able to be around in different circumstances, whether maybe like on the Chico State campus or FFA students, in the many high schools that I represent, people that have gotten involved with helping with the homeless or helping with casework in the aftermath, helping wildfire victims, nonprofits. Like I see a lot of hope there. There is a lot of people who I think really just want to do good things for their community, and I think also like our institutions do work. If we let them, right, and we don't thwart them. We have courts, we have separation of powers, we have a legislative body that should represent everybody and give everybody a voice. And I think those institutions actually still work very well, right? It's when we try to rig them and change them, like redistricting, partisan redistricting is one of them, or it's when we rule by executive order, right, instead of by the legislative deliberative process. That's when things get messed up. And so I think if we let's have some more optimism, in our future generations who are coming up right now and who I think actually really care about the future of our communities and our countries. They want, the American dream that we all experience. Let's have a little bit more optimism, and let's have a little bit more faith in our institutions, to really bring that. And we don't need to scrap our institutions. We don't need to get rid of them. We don't need to reform. I mean, this American experiment works actually very well. These values of freedom and opportunity and the free enterprise system and limited government, they work. Personal responsibility, these things work, right? And I think we just need to really put more faith and belief in them again, and come together. Like, we're going to disagree. It's okay. I tell people all the time, like, you get in an argument with someone, that's okay. That's actually, you almost feel better after having the argument, right? And having the discussion. And then you find out, hey, maybe there's some things that you actually might agree upon. It's when we kind of isolate and don't have the discussion and we kind of think the worst of the other person that things fester and they become unhealthy, right? It's actually better to have argument and debate, and I think that leads to better outcomes. So those are the things that I try to focus on that I think bode well for the next 250 years of this American experiment. Let's not scrap it. Actually, let's double down on American values.
That's so well said. I love that. Well, thank you for your time and for representing rural California. Appreciate you and good luck in November. Hopefully we'll talk to you before then.
Thank you for the time, Keely.